And now we are recording, and this is our ninth week of the Stock Market Game Summer Pilot. We're very appreciative today to have presenters that are going to talk about one of my favorite subjects. Beyond investing itself, careers in finance are just fascinating and they are lucrative. Young people, if you don't know what that word lucrative means, please look it up and find out, because it's very important and it has a lot to do with career choices. Today, our presentation is going to be from Paige Radke of Landaas Company and Ashley Stenklyft, who is with Client Services at Baird. Both of them have worked diligently on putting this together. I've always felt that there are a lot of things that people don't know that they don't know. And I felt strongly that when it comes to the financial world and the world of high finance, that people who grow up in communities that are disassociated from the financial services industry sometimes don't know what careers are there beyond maybe a bank teller or maybe even a mortgage lender. I know I used to hear this term underwriter, and I couldn't imagine what it really meant. However, they're going to go even beyond that and talk about various aspects of what I call not just careers in finance, but actually careers in high finance. With that, I want to thank Paige and Angela for their diligence in putting this together, and I'm going to turn it over now to Paige and Angela.
Okay, good. So my name is Paige Radke. I just want to make sure you guys can, it's just the presentation on the screen now, correct?
Correct.
Okay,
Yes.
perfect. It was showing the presentation mode before, so I wanted to make sure I had that accurate for you guys. I will let Angela introduce herself now as well.
Okay. I'm Ashley Stenklyft, and thank you, Bob, for the introduction. As Bob mentioned, I am in a client services role at Baird here in Milwaukee, and I work within their asset management department. So we're going to talk a little bit about careers within asset management as part of this presentation.
Yep, and then just a little background on me. So I am an investment advisor at Landaas Company. We're a local firm here in Milwaukee. And the reason that I, signed up to be part of the Careers in Finance presentation is because I was involved in a certificate program at University of Wisconsin at Milwaukee. And the program was designed to train you to have a career in high finance and specifically investment related roles. So through that, I was exposed to a lot of different things and then settled on my personal career. So.
Yes, and I would add, as Paige is going to the next slide here, thank you. My path to the finance industry was a little bit more non-traditional than what we're going to talk about today. I actually went to school and I majored in business, but had a marketing focus. And so my path has been that I started at a small investment advisory firm after college in a sales client service type role, and then it moved on to Baird's asset management area, where while I'm in a client services role, I still have financial related certifications and still do get involved with understanding the investment process and the picking out of stocks and those type of things for my area. So as far as the path to getting a career in high finance, most, all the jobs that we're going to talk about today do require a 4-year degree, but there are different degrees that generally lead to these careers. So within business, finance and accounting actually are the two most common degrees from the business area. So while finance may be the obvious one, as we're going to talk about, accounting is also helpful to have an accounting background. And then economics and personal finance, which generally are in the arts and sciences area of a school, tend to be other common degrees that might lead to a path in finance. And along with 4-year degrees, we find that it's really helpful to have internships in this area, as we're going to talk about. A lot of times these jobs in high finance, even at the entry level, want you to have some type of experience, or they can be kind of competitive to get into them. So it's helpful to potentially have an internship in those areas. In addition to a 4-year degree, there are other advanced certifications and master programs, which we'll also touch on. And then in addition to that, there are other certifications that can be helpful depending on the career, such as the SIE, the CFA, and the CFP. So these are all certifications that you would get outside of a general classroom setting, but they can be a long commitment. For example, the CFA is at least a 3-year commitment. It sometimes can potentially take people longer. The CFP, I think, is generally a 2-year commitment plus, work experience that goes with that. And then I think one thing that should never be underestimated is the power of networking. It's, as we'll talk about in the end too, it's never too early to start networking and talking with people in these various careers that can really help with your path as well.
Yeah, so we wanted to start with this and sort of just how you get there, because I know, we're talking to a lot of high school students, a lot of people that are just starting high school. And so because of that, it's important right now to start thinking about if you really want to go into a career in finance. It's never too early to start thinking about that kind of thing. And so, first step is, how do you get there? But then even once you get there, there's always going to be some entry level roles that you're starting at. So we just have 4 examples here that are kind of, again, they're entry level roles that you can get fresh out of college, excuse me, across all the different kinds of things. So the first one that we have on here is equity research analyst, and that's on the sell side. So, this is going to have a starting salary of around $80,000. And this is where you're really doing something similar to the stock market game. But rather than actually buying the stocks and deciding to put them in your portfolio, the equity research analyst does, basically they usually have a specific sector. Sometimes they have a handful of companies that they follow, or they work on a team, and they do really, really deep dives into those specific companies. And then they take that research and they sell it to other people who then use it for their own investment purposes. So, with this side of things, it really is a common one. And this is where we were saying before, where finance or accounting comes in really helpful, because not only do you have to be able to understand what's going on from a financial standpoint, but you have to be able to fully understand the financial statements and changes that they make and what that impact is going to be. And then typically, if you start out as an equity research analyst on the sell side, that opens the door, pretty much to anything you want to do. I would say that that's probably the most broad position that you can get if you want to enter into the finance field. So you can do mutual fund manager, hedge fund manager, investment banker, venture capitalist, and we'll get into all of these a little bit more as we go on. The next one would be an investment banking analyst. So somewhat similar. You're still doing financial modeling, which is basically taking companies' financial statements and trying to figure out, this is where they are now, based off of what they're doing, where might they be in the future? You're going to do industry research, you're going to do company due diligence, which is just making sure you fully understand the business and how it works. But the main difference between being a research analyst in the equity side and investment banking is that investment banking typically works in companies that are not publicly traded or are trying to become publicly traded. And again, pretty broad, but you might go on to become an investment banker, a hedge fund manager, or a venture capitalist. The next one is to be an investment advisor. And this is more so like an investment advisor associate or investment advisor assistant. And this is actually where I started my career. So I came out of college and I had all these different experiences, and I decided that this is what I wanted to do. So I spent my time working as an assistant to different advisors, talking to clients on the phone, helping them with investment advice. And then in the first couple of years, I also did a lot of studying for those licenses that we talked about earlier. And typically this is a path to become an investment advisor or a wealth manager. And then the last one on here is the credit ratings analyst. And this one works less on the equity and stock side of things and more on the bond, debt, banking side of things. So credit analysts typically work for a bank. Milwaukee, I don't, and again, I know we have some Florida residents here. I'm not as familiar with Florida, but there's a lot of banks that are located here in Milwaukee, and almost all of them have a credit analyst training program that they will hire people out of college to do. But so you work at a bank and you analyze companies to try to figure out if you want to give them a loan. And then a ratings analyst does a very similar thing, but they actually look at a company and say, okay, you have this debt or this bond that you're trying to issue. What rating are we going to give you? So what's the likelihood that that's something that's going to get paid back? So either way, you're looking at a company and trying to figure out if you're going to give them money or if they already have money given to them, what's the likelihood that they're going to be able to pay that money back? And again, investment banker, venture capitalist, corporate CEO, or a bank CEO are all positions that you could end up with after being a credit analyst.
Great. Thanks, Paige. And as Paige mentioned, those positions are what would be considered more entry level, and then they're a good gateway into more advanced careers. And as Bob mentioned, these are starting salaries that we have on the document. And I think with a lot of these high finance jobs, the salary ranges can really vary. So in a lot of these instances, we might say that that's your starting salary plus bonus or starting salary plus commission. And then in addition, a lot of companies offer additional benefits such as stock options or employee ownership and other methods of compensation besides just your straight salary. So that's an important aspect too. Paige touched on the sell-side research analyst. Some people, after being a sell-side research analyst, will move on to the buy side. So what the buy side means is that you are working within most likely asset management. These three jobs would be considered jobs within asset management where you're putting together a portfolio of stocks or bonds. A lot of times they're a specific type of portfolio. For example, they might focus on small cap companies that have a growth tilt or small cap companies that have a value tilt. You might hear of style boxes, but they're putting together a portfolio or a mutual fund that they are then selling that portfolio to various people. So a research analyst, same thing as the sell side, they're really analyzing stocks and bonds closely, focusing on a particular style. A very analytical position. You generally don't have a lot of client interaction, can sometimes work longer hours during the week, sometimes travel. From there, you have a mutual fund manager. So this person is in charge of the portfolio of stocks or bonds, and they kind of make the final decisions with input a lot of times from research analysts. So it's generally a team of people where the mutual fund manager is the person in charge, if you will, of making the final decisions and making sure that portfolio is performing the way that it would. We have a question from Mark, and yes, please feel free to ask any questions while we're talking. What is an example of a stock style? So the two main common types of style are growth stocks and value stocks. And then you have stocks that are considered core, which are in the middle. Characteristics of those stocks would be you're looking at the company valuations, the profitability of the company. You're digging into company attributes, which will tell you if something is a growth stock or a value stock. And generally speaking, those styles of stocks tend to perform different at different times of the economy of the market. And so a lot of people, which Paige could probably speak to this a little bit more, a lot of people try to have a balance in their overall portfolio.
Yes, I mean, talking about if it's regarding a distribution, then yes, you can assist them.
Yeah,
Yes.
so
I'm
like
sorry.
so you might have a company, or you might have a fund or a mutual fund that has a focus on income. I think that might be what you're talking
This
about.
is
So
Kevin.
so if a company has a or sort of a mutual fund, they might have a focus on saying, okay, we want to make sure that we're having some distributions. We want to make sure that we have some income that's coming out. That might be the goal of a fund. So when you look at style boxes, a stock style it would be like
Thank you.
growth.
Thank you. How are you, Mackenzie?
What? It'd be like growth, value, blend, large,
Excuse me,
small.
one
Yep.
1 second. Bob, you're being the host. Can you mute Kevin, please?
Okay, I didn't know who it was. Let me see if I can find it.
Okay, I was confused there for a second. I was like, what?
Yes, it's just somebody wasn't on mute and they're not aware of it.
Okay, he should be on mute.
Thank you. You can go ahead.
So I was just saying, when you're talking about a style of a stock, there's typically you see it and it's kind of in like a grid format. So you're going to have 9 style boxes on there, and they're going to fall into there's going to be 2 different types of categories. One is the type of stock, so whether it's growth, blend, or value. And then going down, you're going to have whether it's large cap, mid cap, or small cap. So you might have a fund that says, okay, we focus on large cap blend, or you have a fund that says we focus on small cap growth, or something like that. And so typically funds fall into one of those categories of something that they're actually aiming to achieve. Something like an income fund or a distribution fund would fall into the category probably of like a large cap value.
Yes, thank you, Paige. So a mutual fund, back to talking about the mutual fund manager and the research analyst, kind of moving on from that is a hedge fund manager. So a hedge fund manager is very similar to a mutual fund manager, only the types of investments that they might include in their portfolio can be considered a lot more aggressive or risky, and it's not just your basic types of investments that you would buy on the exchange, or you've probably been doing in your stock market game. It can include derivatives, selling short, and leverage. So it's considered a more high risk way of investing, and in order to invest in those kind of products, you have to be considered an accredited investor. So not everyone is able to invest in those types of products. So again, that position 2, very data oriented and usage of models for trading. Any other questions before we move on to some other positions? Okay, moving on to some other positions that, oh, thank you, Lonnie. Moving on to some other positions that Paige talked about too, as far as positions available after those entry-level ones. The first one is investment banking. So I think the easiest way to describe investment banking is that you are helping facilitate large and complicated financial transactions between entities. So I think the most common ones that the group might hear are mergers and acquisitions, the sale of a company, or an initial public offering. So behind the scenes of these types of sales is an investment banking team that is putting these, what they call deals, putting these deals together. And these are generally companies that are not trading on the stock market. So it's private investments that are funding these deals and making them happen. This work environment is very fast-paced, and it can also be very demanding hours given the nature of you're generally up against a deadline of when the deal might close or when the deal might need to close, and all of the pieces that need to come together in order for it to close. So I know Baird has an investment banking department, and you often hear of the people on that team working very late hours, sometimes working on the weekends, on the holidays, depending on what deals are in motion. But it can be a very lucrative, as Bobby used the word, it can be a very lucrative career as well, generally with a pretty high starting salary. The next one we'll describe is a venture capitalist. So this is putting together the funds to invest in startup businesses. So I love the consideration that Paige put in here as far as watch an episode of Shark Tank, which some people might be familiar with that show. They work to analyze businesses, help them raise the funds to start up their business, help manage the expectations of the business owner, that type of thing. And again, a pretty high salary. The last one on this page is the corporate bank CEO. And I did put in here that the salary can really vary based on the size of the bank, because when you think about it, there are small community banks, and then there are large banks such as Chase and JP Morgan. So as you can imagine, the salary range can really differ based on the size of the bank you're at. And this role has a lot of responsibility because you are essentially in charge of all of the bank's operations and procedures and overseeing them. And banks can be very highly, or they are very highly regulated. And so I think it's this person's duty and responsibility to make sure the bank is following all of the policies and procedures and in line with all of the regulations. Generally for this position, you need several years of experience in various banking roles, need to understand banking operations. You're generally managing a team of people that are also in pretty high up positions at that bank. Another question, can you give us a range of salaries for bank CEO? They can range from a couple $100,000. I think the lowest one that I saw was around $300,000, all the way up to millions of dollars. So when you talk about a CEO of the large banks like JP Morgan, Wells Fargo, banks like that, the salaries can be in the millions. And a lot of times, as I mentioned, part of that salary component will be stock ownership, other perks other than just your salary, bonuses at the end of the year, that type of thing. So again, once you get into these high-level finance jobs, your salary can be more complicated than just what's on your paycheck every 2 weeks. So it's important to think about that too as you're potentially moving into these types of jobs, is what other compensation are they offering besides just salary?
And just to give you guys an idea of how, like when we say variable based on size, and we say that those can change based off of all these other circumstances, I just did a Google search, and this is from 2007, so it's a little bit old. But just as an example, so in 2007, the CEO of the Bank of America, so a very big bank in the United States, their salary was $1.5 million, but their total compensation for that year was $24.8 million. So it's not as simple as just saying, this is what your salary is. It's actually, there's a lot of other things that depend on that. You know, even going to like a little bit of a smaller bank, for example, Citigroup had a CEO, or they're not even their CEO, their CFO. Their salary was around $400,000 per year, but their take-home pay was $19.4 million. So we're talking about big numbers here. These are, I mean, the people that are basically running the financial system of our country, other than the banks, or other than the federal banks. And so now, sorry.
Yeah, I was just going to say, any questions before we move on to the next positions? Bureau of Labor Statistics. Yep, the Bureau, which Paige will talk about, the Another helpful website is Investopedia, also has a career section that has various descriptions and also salary ranges.
Sorry. Okay, sorry about that. I had a issue with my computer, but so now the next one, so we sort of talked about what the entry level positions are. We talked about advanced positions that you can have that are on the equity side of things. We talked about the ones that you can have on the private market side of things. And now this last one is more of like the client focused. And again, I'm talking about this slide because this is the field that I actually fall into. So when you look at an investment advisor, and again, the first thing to note is that all of these jobs are a little bit like the names can be interchangeable sometimes. Like you might hear someone say, oh, I'm a wealth manager, or I'm an investment advisor, or I'm a financial planner. And they all sort of do deal in the same general idea of things. And again, the salaries of these are going to be very, very variable. The world has changed a lot over the last 20 years in terms of how these investment advisors, things like that, get paid. It used to be, an upfront commission charge. So all you cared about was bringing in more money. And the more money you brought in, the more you got paid. And if it was a bad year, you didn't get paid as much. If it was a good year, you got paid more. So very, very sales focused. Over the past 20 years, it's shifted a lot more towards more of a client focused side of thing, where there's some sort of ongoing pay structure. There's still commissions and things like that. But, it really depends, because you might have a financial advisor who says, I'll work with a client that has anywhere from $100,000 to $1 million. But then you might have someone that says, I won't pick up the phone for less than 10 million. And so while they both have, they're still working as investment advisors, their client base really determines what their take home pay is. So the first one on here is a financial advisor, which is the realm that I fall into. And essentially it's working with individual clients, sometimes organizations, maybe helping them with their employee plans, to make investment recommendations. And this is where sort of the style box comes into play. One of the things that we will look at is, whereas on Angela's side, they're looking and saying, okay, we have this one fund that we manage that has this purpose. We are going to look at a lot of different funds and say, okay, what is the best fund that meets this purpose, and how can we construct a portfolio for a client that fits their needs? So, we'll look at economic indicators, stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs. But again, this one, I think there's a very strong mix between the analytic side of things and interpersonal skills. There's a lot of person-to-person contact. And again, back to what we talked about earlier, networking is really key, because like I was saying, the more money you bring in, the more money that you make. And the only way to make money is to meet people. So next one on here is the financial planner and wealth management side of things. So again, very similar to investment advisor, but typically the financial planner or a wealth manager is going to work with a person and put together, and they help them manage every portion of their financial life. So they'll look at things and say, okay, this is how much you need to save this year to be able to send this year and every year going forward based off of what we've seen in the past. And you need to do that to say, okay, this is how much money I need to start saving in order to send my child to school. This is how much money I need to save in order to pay off my mortgage before I retire. This is how much money I need to save to retire. So it's very, very long-term. Oftentimes financial planners and wealth managers will work as a team. So there might be somebody on the team who is an investment advisor, somebody on the team who is an accountant, somebody who sells insurance, life insurance, variable insurance, all those sorts of things. But again, strong focus on relationship, customer building. You have to have really strong communication skills, be able to explain yourself clearly, and make sure that people who don't work in finance or don't work in that field have the ability to understand, sort of these complex terms, and make sure that they're comfortable, because after all, if you're going to spend all this time saving money, you want to make sure that it's safe, and you want to make sure that you understand what's going on. And then the last one here again is a trust officer. So similar to like what we had done before, where you kind of looked at individual companies, trust officers you often see at banks. So their responsibilities is, so if you guys don't know what a trust account is, basically a trust is a legal entity. So, you know, I can open an account and say, this is Paige Radke's investment account, but you can also open an account that is in the name of a trust. The trust has typically a couple of people who are responsible for, you know, executing what's written in the trust. Sometimes they're pretty simple, sometimes they're very complicated, but typically a trust has, you know, specific purposes, specific beneficiaries. So if you're a trust officer at a bank, you're going to be working with clients. Only in this case, rather than the client being an individual, the client is that trust. So sometimes you have to balance different things. You know, like I've seen trusts that are written where the first beneficiary can only take income. And then once that person dies, the next person can take 50%, you know, so there's all these different ways and you have to follow them very, very closely. And so a trust officer has to have some legal understanding. They deal with estates, so a lot of dealing with when people pass away. But again, you know, just helping people make sure that, you know, in this case, if you've spent your whole life saving all this money and you don't think that you're going to spend it before you pass away, and you want to make sure that when you do pass away, that money gets used in a way that you determine is best. So that's when a trust officer comes into play, again, helping set those up and make sure that they're followed. I did see a question. Just a second.
Paige,
Okay,
you got it.
Yeah, I got it. So it says the financial planner / wealth management sounds a bit similar to an accountant from what I know. So what are the differences between a financial planner and accountant? Okay, that is a good question. So so there's a couple of different kinds of accounting that you can go into. I would say one of the most common ones that you hear about and where people start off more often is to become a public accountant. So if you are working at like an auditing firm, so one of the paths to become an accountant is to basically say, you know, all this knowledge of how companies' financial statements are supposed to work, and you go to them and you say, okay, give me your financial statements. I'm going to go through them with a fine-tooth comb and figure out from there if you know, what you're doing falls in line with what the laws are regarding accounting practices. But it sounds to me like you're focusing more on like a personal accountant. So a personal accountant will be the person that files your tax returns for you. So when you're talking about like wealth management, financial planning, that's where I was saying it sort of comes from a team environment. So you might have a team of financial planners that all work together and each person has a specialty. So one of those specialties might be to be an accountant. And then that person is putting together all of your tax statements, doing your tax returns for you. If you're a business owner, helping with estimated tax payments and things like that. So the accountant really, really focuses on the tax side of things, whereas the financial planner is going to focus more on the money management side of things. So one of the ways that they can work together, or like, for example, how I might work with an accountant would be to say, okay, we know that you need to take out a sum of money, and we want to make sure that we do that in the most tax effective way possible. So we want to make it so that you can pay the least amount of taxes, basically. And so then, you know, the way I do it as an investment advisor is I might say, can I talk to your tax accountant? They'll get me in contact with them. We'll have a conversation. With the wealth management, they usually work on a team. So a financial planner or a wealth manager will say, I want to sell this stock fund. But then the accountant will come in and say, well, if you sell that stock fund, they're going to owe $10,000 in taxes. So rather than selling that stock fund today, maybe you should do it at a different time. So really, I mean, the big difference is just that a financial planner is more so looking out to how much money you need to save. A wealth manager is looking at how do we make sure that that money stays protected and also grows. And then the accountant looks and says, okay, let's make sure we can do this in a way that is the most tax efficient way possible. I hope that answers the question. Do we have any more questions on this slide in regards to any of these different career paths? Nope. Okay. So then we just added one more slide here at the end, focusing on some helpful tips for you guys to look at. So the first thing, which we touched on at a bit at the beginning, is to just make sure that you pick a major in finance, accounting, economics, personal finance. You know, I'm not ashamed to say that when I went to University of Wisconsin, I did not get into the business school. I had too much fun at football games, I guess. I don't know. But so that when I didn't get into the business school, I couldn't study finance or accounting. So I decided to study economics, and it actually ended up being a perfect base for me to be able to then go to graduate school and study finance. And I think a lot of times, you know, that's one of the biggest issues that we hear, is that a lot of people that work in finance, if they work in like corporate finance for a company, they don't actually have a really good understanding of how the economy works. But if you're going to work in investments, I think that those two things go really hand in hand. The other thing I just want to point out is that personal finance as a major, not all schools have that. So that would be something that you'd want to seek out. I know University of Wisconsin has one, but I know the University of Wisconsin in Milwaukee does not. Okay, so just a question. Someone asked, what are our highest degrees? So they're asking me and Angela. So I have I have an undergraduate degree in economics and Spanish. And then I also have a master's degree in financial, what do they call it? In finance analysis, and a certificate in applied investment management.
So I have an undergraduate degree in business with actually a marketing specialty, as I think I possibly mentioned at the beginning. My path was a little bit more non-traditional, and I'm not in an advising role per se. But I do, as part of my role, have a couple of license certificates. So I have what's called a Series 7 and a Series 66, which does essentially allows me to give financial advice, if you will, and talk to clients about financial matters. And there are various certifications that you can get as part of your career. If I wanted to go into the investment side of things within asset management, I think that would certainly be a possibility, and my work would probably recommend that I look at a master's program or possibly the CFA certification. So the CFA certification is the securities financial, no, sorry, not securities. What is CFA?
Certified.
Certified, thank you.
Yeah.
Certified financial analyst. So as I mentioned in the beginning, that's a 3-year program where you take a test each year in order to move on to the next level, but it is really diving into investments and analyzing them, and some accounting, as Paige mentioned. And so I think that there are various ways to further your education once you have that base degree, depending on which area you want to specialize in.
Mm-hmm.
If I could just come in for just a second. This is Mark Shug. I'm an emeritus professor at UWM, so the college degree things are always of interest to me. UWM has a good business school. UW-Madison is a very strong business school. UW-Whitewater. So students, these are all good places. UW-Eau Claire has a business college. And then, as has been indicated, several of the private schools have very good programs as well. Marquette would probably lead the list, but I do some work at Lakeland University. They've got a very good school of business and entrepreneurship. And so several of the private schools are good too. But for your undergraduate degree, maybe you want to stay with a state school because it's a lot cheaper, but for some of you, you're going to get scholarships and things like that. So it might be worth looking at one of the private schools like a Marquette. I'm trying to remember, maybe someone can help me with what's the one up in the Green Bay area in
St. Norbert?
Oh, St. Norbert, yeah, St. Norbert.
St. Norbert.
Yeah, especially in economics, I think they do a pretty good job. They're only down to a couple of econ faculty, but and so almost all these places would offer economics and accounting, as well as a finance major within their school of business. The other thing that the students need to know is that a good math background really helps a lot. And I think that, Paige, you have the degree in economics?
Yes.
Yeah, so I think that's a really good path. But to get that degree in economics, you had to complete a lot of mathematics courses. And
Yes. So I actually went and I have, so my degree is in economics with an emphasis in math, actually. So in order to get the emphasis in math, I had to take basically every calculus class that is available. So I started off in Calc for business majors, and then because I decided to do that emphasis in math, I also took Calc 1, Calc 2, Calc 3, and then I had to take a statistics course, and I had to take a class that was called linear algebra and elementary matrices. I did not like that one. And I also had to take a course that was called econometrics, which is basically the statistical analysis of economic data.
Well, so the point to the students, and I see something came up here. Okay, Bob Glowacki is sharing a link here. You need to get as much math in the high school level as you can. And if you could be do your utmost to find a good math teacher. And I understand math teachers are really hard to find in pretty much any high school. But there's a rumor that there's a really good math teacher at MATC that maybe you could take a course from. But don't let a bad teacher mislead you on the math. You can learn the math. It just takes some time and effort if it doesn't come completely intuitively. But almost any good career, and if it's not you, it's not you. You know, it's not the end of the world, but by any means. But many successful people in this world don't have a strong math aptitude. But if you can develop that skill, it's really helpful to so many of these well-paying careers that you've been hearing about. So now the college prof will be quiet and turn off his screen and listen to what everybody else has to say.
Mark, I was just, sorry. I was going to agree with that, because even though I chose marketing, math, economics, and statistics classes were always the ones that seemed to be the easiest for me, and I wound up in finance, even though I picked a marketing major. So I think it was, I maybe didn't realize that early on, as far as being good with numbers and having that math background, and that it does help in my role today. What I worry about is that math scores in the country are so low, and they're really low in the MPS. And so it's really easy for a student to give up rather than seek tutoring, reach out farther in the community to get help. If you're struggling with your introductory algebra course, you can get this. You just need to get the right help, because sometimes your teacher is not, I don't mean to be so hard on teachers, but it's just really hard to find good math teachers. They all go into finance.
But even like he was saying, if there's a really good math teacher at MATC, even if you are later in school and you're sort of thinking like, ooh, I'm kind of behind on getting to go on these things, or you're trying to figure out funding, or maybe you don't know exactly what direction you want to go in, MATC has a transfer program available. So you do have the ability to go to MATC for 2 years, focus on the fundamentals, get your grades up, get your sort of like general education requirements out of the way, and then move on to another UW school to finish up and get that bachelor's degree. So that's a really good option especially if you like haven't started this process yet. But just going off of what he was saying, a quick plug for UW Milwaukee. So I went to UW Madison for undergraduate, and I went to UW Milwaukee for my graduate degree. I think UW Milwaukee doesn't get enough credit as I think it sort of deserves. It is a phenomenal business school. I learned so much while I was there. So I put up here, there's one at Marquette, and then there's one at UW Milwaukee. It's called IMCP. I'm an alumnus of that program, so I went through there while I was getting my master's degree, but it is available for undergraduates. And I know I saw over here that Bob asked a question about diversity and inclusion in the space of high finance. So just one thing to note, whether you're a minority or even just a female, there's been a lot of struggles to try to get up in that side of the career. Oftentimes you hear a woman who might be, if it has characteristics of a man who they might say he's very strong, very motivated. They might look at a woman and say, okay, well, you are a little bit too aggressive. So see how motivated versus aggressive, whereas really it's kind of the same. So there's been a lot of work for some more diversity and inclusion in the space. And so the reason I brought that back up is that the IMCP certificate program at UW-Milwaukee is very, very diverse. Almost every year he tries to make sure there's at least 2 females. So I was one of the 2 in my class. The other girl from my class was an African-American who now works at Edward Jones. I know, I go to speak to the class sometimes, and it's always a very, very diverse group of kids. So not only, from that standpoint of there's been a push to have more diversity in the high finance space, there's programs around here that'll actually really help with that as well. So the next thing just on the presentation from a helpful tip standpoint is to look for an internship early. So Angela talked about this a little bit when we were on that first slide, but really it is never too early for you to start with an internship. I will admit that as an undergrad, I did not do that, and I didn't even realize the importance of it. Nobody told me that it was as important as it ended up being. But really, you can get an internship as soon as possible, and whether that be simply just helping with some office things around this company and sitting in on meetings and things like that, at least it gets you the exposure and it helps you start meeting more people. And with these internships, usually if you're, a freshman, sophomore in college, you'd want to look for some that are in the summertime. But as you get a little bit older in school, they have some that actually go full-time as well. And these are not the internships of days old where you are running around and getting coffee and not getting paid. You get paid to be an intern now. So when you look at these internship jobs, whether it be summer or year long, more often than not, again, you are getting paid. Sometimes you'll get college credit, which is kind of like getting paid because college is so expensive nowadays. But again, never too early to start going after those internships. The next thing that I highly recommend is to get a mentor. So there's lots of different professional mentorship programs out there. I know in Milwaukee, there's the Young Professional Urban League, and anyone from there working in finance, I'm sure would be happy to help someone. It looks like, La Crosse has a really good program. Whitewater has a program. And even again, and I just keep talking about UW-Milwaukee because that's where I went and that's where I'm involved. But UWM has a multicultural mentoring program where they find students that are more diverse and they pair them up with professionals in the community. And while you're an actual student, you go through a whole program working with professionals to try to help you through the college process and then through the job process as well. And those mentors can stay with you for your whole career. So somebody that, if you're trying to decide, should I take this job? Should I not? Should I switch careers? That's someone that you can lean on that can really help you through that process. And then the last thing on here, again, start networking. Network at any chance you can get. And for a lot of people, myself included, networking is a very daunting task. It's like, how do you meet people in these fields if you're not working in the fields? There's different events you can go to, there's conferences, there's mentorship programs where you can meet people that way. Never be afraid to name drop. Rich kids are doing it all the time. You have those trust fund babies who their parents already are working on Wall Street and making all that money. They're going to drop their parents' names, their grandparents' names, their neighbors' names. So anytime you're applying for a job and you're thinking, okay, if you know someone that works there, just mention, hey, I was talking to this person about that job and I'm wondering what you think about it. I might be a good fit. And then the other thing is, this is something that the director of my program at UWM used to always tell us. And, the big emphasis was as UWM students, we always felt like underdogs compared to Marquette. We were constantly competing against them as well as Madison. And so we always felt like we had something to prove. But so we called him coach. What he always says is that it's what you know that's going to get you that job, but a lot of times it's who you know that gets you in the door. So the who you know isn't going to get you that job. It's what you know that's going to get it. But if you want to be able to get through that door and present yourself, it's going to be helpful for you to have had some networking and have had your name thrown around. So that's all that we have for you. I know we went a little bit over time, but does anybody have any more questions for us? Both Angela and I talked about it, and we wanted to make sure that we left you guys some time for questions, because I think that's a really important part of this as you're going forward. And so we don't want you guys to feel like you can't ask.
Right. So why don't you take a moment and unmute if you have a question, or put it in the chat box.
If you guys don't want to be put on the spot, you don't have, feel free. I put my email on there too. So even if you are, trying to go to UWM, or you're thinking about MATC and you want to reach out with any personal questions, don't hesitate to reach out. I'd be happy to meet you, whether it be on Zoom, we can meet at a park, anything like that. So.
Okay.
I was going to add that as well. My email address isn't in the presentation, but Bob can certainly share it with the team. And it's a way to start networking, is to talk to Paige and I and other people that you've met through this program. Again, I think networking can be daunting, but it's situations like this where you now have 2 contacts in the industry in Milwaukee that have, done different paths that you can reach out to and talk to and bounce ideas off.
Well, and even for me and Angela, she's at Baird. It's a huge company, so I'm sure that she knows somebody in a different department than she works in that she might be able to introduce you to. I have a pretty large network of people that I went to school with. So if you don't want to work in investment advising, I can still hook you up with somebody who maybe you'd be more comfortable with, or somebody who's in a field that you're more interested in, and I'd be happy to do that as well.
Okay, my name is Larry. I'd like to get Mr. Wynn's email address.
Okay, I'll put it in the chat box for you.
Appreciate it.
Okay, Larry, who are you with?
Operation Dream.
Oh, fantastic. Wynn at.
You don't remember me? I'm name dropping, Mr. Wynn. I met you at St. Francis several years ago.
Larry, yeah, I think I do remember, and I would definitely look forward to hearing from you too.
Okay.
Yeah, I've been talking to Marco and a few others over at Operation Dream, and one of the young people are on the call right now, Rafiq, who is also someone I met from Operation Dream. So we're networking through Zoom.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, appreciate it. Okay.
Sure. Do you have any other questions, Larry, at this time?
No, that's it.
Okay, good. I just put in my email. I'd love to hear from you. At this point, I just want to thank Paige Radke as well as Ashley Stenklyft, who put together a wonderful presentation. As I've said before, it is a keeper, and we're going to have it in the Dropbox for the Stock Market Game Summer Pilot Advisors. So you'll have access to their PowerPoint as well as this recording. Just remember some of the major takeaways, the wonderful salaries that are even at the starting level and goes up into the millions as people accelerate into their upper levels of their career. That 4-year degree is sort of pivotal. So just be very mindful if you choose not to pursue a 4-year college degree. On the way, get yourself acquainted and comfortable with mathematics. And that networking, whatever you're looking to do, don't underestimate the value of networking. And for individuals that might be from communities of color, you're going to have to really reach beyond your normal network or your comfort level. And don't be afraid to just find someone that seems interesting and ask them for a informational interview. I used to really enjoy and value informational interviews. You get to know people. Sometimes if they like you, you hit it off and they see your career path. They'll either guide you or they might even offer you an internship or something right there on the spot. So I can't underestimate the importance of networking, especially when you need to be more aggressive or assertive in building a network if you don't come from an area where people are circling in these arenas on a natural basis. With that, let's
I
just,
have a question,
yes,
Bob.
yes.
This question is for both
Introduce yourself,
Paige.
Ione.
Hi, my name is Ione. Thank you, Paige and Angela. I had a question. Well, I guess I should introduce my background. I went to Howard University. I actually majored in accounting. I don't talk about that often, but
Summa
uh,
cum laude.
but funny enough, I did not go into high finance because I did a 3-day intensive at JP Morgan, and they had a rotational in the 3 areas you talked about, and the only one I think personality wise that I was a fit for was for research, because I got stuck, when on the buy and the sell side. I was like not quick enough, and then the investment banking side, I actually also was a fit for mergers and acquisitions, but I think the hours scared me away. But my question to both of you is, what has been your own personal investment journey? Because it's one thing, I think, to work in the field of high finance and to be around all of that information and work on, the portfolios of high net worth individuals and funds and that type of stuff. But I don't really hear a lot of time people in finance actually talking about their own personal portfolio. And not that you have to share what stocks you own and stuff like that, but are you doing something, personally, in addition to having a high income job?
So I will say, being that I work within asset management with mutual funds, I've found myself to be a little bit biased towards those. And given my age, I've been a little bit biased towards equity funds. But I think that I'll admit that being around it all day, sometimes I lose a little bit of enthusiasm for myself to look at my personal investments. But I personally, again, I think just in the industry, I am more inclined to be in kind of an asset allocation model, what Paige does, where it's a balanced portfolio where someone else is almost choosing for me. We think this is a good mix of funds, alongside with my bias towards kind of what my team invests in and what I trust there.
So for me, I think that I really fall into the category of I don't know if I would say that I practice what I preach so much as I preach what I practice. So, when I tell clients what I think is best for them, obviously there's a certain, kind of like what Angela is saying, is there's a specific mix of investments that works for them, how much stocks they have, how much bonds they have, things like that. But when it comes to the mutual funds that I recommend to clients are the same mutual funds that I'm also using myself. So for my personal experience, I mean, again, it really is, I believe in what I tell people. So when you really fully believe in what you're telling people, you're not afraid to do it for yourself. So I'm not telling my client to do A and I'm doing B. I'm going to do, if I'm telling them A, I'm probably doing A too. It just might be doing it at a different extent depending on where we are in our lifetimes. So the big thing for me that I focus on is just making sure that, especially for young people, that and this is something that I tell my friends, I tell my close family members, is that it's never too early to start investing. There's something that we look at called the power of compounding. And I've done a bunch of different spreadsheets just to show my friends, okay, if you start putting in $25 a month, if you start putting in $50 a month to this account, this is where you're going to be when you want to retire at 60 years old. So just, and I do the same thing where, dollar cost averaging. I have a Roth IRA where I put X amount of money in every single month. It automatically buys something that I like, and periodically I check to see where I am and make any adjustments. 401k, I always say put in at least enough to get your company's full match. So that's one thing with the 401k is if you work for a company, even if you're not in finance, they give you the ability to take money directly out of your paycheck, put it away, automatically invest it, and then your company will actually match a certain percentage. So it might be 3%, 4%, but if you just take 3% of your paycheck and every single time you get paid, you put that money away, your company will put that same amount of money away for you. It's free money. So, again, for me, it's my investment experience really revolves around what I think is right and what I think is best. And so what I do is the same thing that I tell anybody else to do.
Well,
I think that's a good point. Oh, I'm sorry. I was just going to add, I think that's a good point with these, I think that's a good point with these careers also, is that it's, you do want to believe in what you're working with, because if you don't, your clients will notice it, your peers will notice it. That's a big thing in this industry as well, is you really have to believe in what you're doing and, personally buy into that philosophy as well.
We call it drinking the Kool-Aid.
Yeah, I know. I say that all the time. Sometimes I'll be like, oh my gosh, I drank my own Kool-Aid.
Yes,
So
yes.
I do it all the
That's
time.
exactly what I thought when you were talking. I mean, because I don't know, and you can probably talk to this, but sometimes there's not that level of authenticity in your line of business, especially you, Paige. There's some people that go into it, but they personally are very conservative. So they don't even have their own money in the stock market. They may be in bonds or gold or CDs or something because they can't tolerate it, but they know enough up here to be able to advise someone else. The last question I actually also have for the two of you is, can you share what age you started investing?
Yes. So I'll go first with that one. So, technically I started investing when I was a baby. That's a privilege that my parents set aside for me. And my first investment experience was actually my parents putting away money to save for me to go to college. And it wasn't a secret. So as I got older, I was shown my financial statements. It wasn't something that my parents hid from me. It was something that they made a very big part of growing up. So every time we'd get a quarterly statement, my mom would say, here, this is where you are. This is how much we put in. This is how it's grown. And then, just beyond that, from more of a, holistic standpoint, is when I was in high school, we had an investment management club or a stock portfolio club. So very similar to what you guys did. And so it wasn't my money. But still just, getting comfortable with it and having that opportunity to go in that route. And then as far as when did I start investing my own money, I started investing my own money the day that I got a real job. So when I went from, I worked at UWM in the bursar's office. When I went from that to having even my first internship, because I was over 18, they gave me access to the company 401k. So even though it was my internship, I was still putting a certain amount of money away every month or every paycheck to make sure that, again, the earlier you start, the better. So I just can't stress that enough, is that you could put something away and never look. You could start when you're 18 and not even look at it again until you're 30 years old. And you would be shocked by just putting $25 a month where you end up.
Thank you. Angela.
Yes, thank you. And I would add that my experience is similar to Paige, in that my grandparents had started a college account for me that I was involved with. My dad was actually a financial advisor. So he, I think, was pretty, which I'm fortunate in that way, that he was very good about showing me and teaching me investments. And when Paige talked about, a first job, I think before I could legally work, would help file papers in his office and, do little tasks for him. So I was exposed to that environment then. Other than the college savings account, my first investment opportunity was 401k with my first job after college. And I think I understood the importance of of putting aside what your employer would match, as Paige mentioned, to make sure to take full advantage of that. And then it wasn't until probably 5 years out of college, or a little bit longer, that I started investing in addition to my 401k. You know, it took a little while after college to kind of get on my feet, have some additional disposable income that I felt comfortable setting aside in an investment account, aside from just the traditional employer-sponsored 401k.
Yeah, I just, you know, just one thing that I wanted to build on from that is just, you know, I know that a lot of the students that we're talking to right now, you know, are working in summer programs, and, you know, maybe you might not have family members that have invested in your lifetime. You know, that's something that unfortunately has been more of a white person thing. I mean, for lack of a better way to say it. You know, I think that right now what's happening in the world really speaks to that. You know, you hear communities of color being disproportionately affected by COVID-19. Meanwhile, you know, and people losing their jobs, people unable to pay rent. Well, on the flip side, you have Donald Trump talking about how well the stock market is doing, as if that's some sort of indicator for the overall economy. It is not an indicator for the overall economy. The economy and the stock market are two different things. The stock market is something that not a lot of people have access to. The economy is something that everybody participates in. So, you know, I think you know, personally, he does a pretty big disservice by touting the stock market as though that's the way the country economy is doing. But the reality is that the more people of color that we can get to start investing, that is going to be a way that you can have that generational wealth. You know, there's a lot of foundation that was built on the fact that people started investing when they were young. It's never too late to start. And, you know, there's something very powerful about having enough money to pass along to your children or your grandchildren, because that is how you elevate yourself over the long term. So when you're talking about investing, it's not just about you. It is about you. I mean, it's fun to be able to do the things that you want to do, and it's fun, you know, you want to be able to retire. If you invest, you can get to a point in time in your life where you no longer have to work, and you still can live the life that you're living, and then pass that along to your kids so that they can keep living the life that they want to live after they want to retire. So, I mean, it's not just about putting your money in the stock market. It is about building your wealth. It is about building generational wealth and pulling yourselves up. And, you know, I just can't say enough how important I think it is that everybody should put an emphasis on investing.
I would like to ask about small cap stocks. How many people in your firms work with small cap stocks? Is that a focus of your firm? Do you not really deal with that? Do you deal with basically mid cap and large cap stocks?
I can take that one first. So it is actually a focus of the asset management group at Baird. We have a small cap value mutual fund. So we have a small cap value mutual fund, and then we have a small mid cap value and a small mid cap growth. So we do have analysts that focus on investing in that smaller company and putting together those portfolios.
And when you look at these companies, how many of these companies do you have, let's say 5 baggers and 10 baggers? What percentage?
I'm not quite sure. I'd have to look at that a little bit closer. As far as what percentage of, oh, sorry, go ahead, Paige.
No, you go. Was he saying like what percentage of, like, are you talking about like market cap?
You know, what percentage of the small cap stocks that you actually invest in and that you actually do the investment on, that you find your five baggers and maybe even your 10 baggers, what percentage falls within that category? And then maybe what percentage of those small cap stocks really go out of business? Those companies go out of business.
I don't think we have too many that actually go out of business. I think that as part of the analyzing these companies, there are certain parameters that are in place that we don't have that many of them that go out of business. But I'd have to look at the exact percentage as far as where they fall within those different buckets, and it can change too. I know that with the stock market being so volatile this year, what we call the market cap range has really gone up and down so far in 2020. So we always look at, we compare it to an index, and we look at where the index falls with the market cap range. So we'll look at a small cap index and try to stick within a certain percentage of that index range so that our clients aren't taking on what we feel is too much risk.
Okay, well, we have gone somewhat over time, but that's because this was a really great presentation. There were wonderful questions and discussions afterwards, and we definitely will be putting this presentation into the Dropbox, both the PowerPoint and the recording. We want to remind people, if you are advisors, to get your email addresses of all of your student team members into Julie at Economics Wisconsin. We would also want to be sure that advisors are facilitating their students to take the post test, and everybody mark your calendar for our last program, which is going to be our capstone. And that will be this coming Tuesday, the 25th, 5:30 Central Time. It'll be a different time, 5:30 Central Time, 6:30 Eastern Time. And Paige and Angela, this was a wonderful presentation. I love this stuff so much. I really don't want to hang up, but we've taken enough of your time, and in your space, time really is money. So definitely thank you for taking this time with us. We will be available for other questions. I put my email in the chat box. And we're going to do some more active office hours, even beyond August the 25th. We just have to figure out what that will look like, when we might do it, given the students are going back to school. But there's just too much good information out there with good people willing to share. And we're going to figure out how to structure this in a way that we can continue this networking by Zoom. That's what we're doing. With that, I will close it out and thank all of you for your participation.
Bob, I want to have closing comments.
Well, I defer to the baby billionaire.
So I just want to thank Paige and Angela, and I was not going to make this comment, but because Paige used the word white, I will make this comment. And this comment is really not for the presenters. The comment is for everybody else that's on the call, that is an advisor, that is a mother and a father, that is a sister and a brother, and especially the young people under 18. My statement is, this is what privilege looks like. They told you their history, which actually impacted their trajectory. And I did not want to leave this space with people feeling less than or unfortunate because they have not been as privileged as the two presenters up till now. But I do want to say that we all have to start somewhere. When I came into this information, I started in elementary school. As you all are on this call, you have come into this information. Please, please, please plant the seeds now. They take 20, 30 years to grow. They are trees. Please heed the words of Paige, of Angela, of Robert, of Emmanuel, of everybody that has presented in all of these office hours for all of this summer, 10 weeks strong. If you do nothing else, please start an investment account for yourself, for your child, for your grandchild, because even though you may not have come from a privileged background, within 1 or 2 generations, you can create privileged backgrounds and opportunities for your family. And that's how we're going to do it for our community. So thank you again to Paige and Angela. I really appreciated you all both being authentic and transparent. And we loved hearing your story and sharing with us the careers in high finance, according to Bob. We really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Oh,
Thank you so much. And
Thank you.
Ione is a seed herself, and she's growing into a mighty oak. She was planted by her mother, not just by birth, but by development at a very early age. Her mom is one of my best friends, and you see the product of parenting, both from a financial standpoint, as well as preparing them to meet the world and really find a place and a channel in the world. I only wanted the last word, so I'm not going to say any more, but I just want to emphasize our thanks to Paige and Angela today. And it's just been a really inspiring conversation. What about these active office hours? They are really something, aren't they? Thank you all.
Thank you,
you.
everyone. This was great.
Thank you.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Bye.
Bye.